Dear Kevin Chidwick, as I understand it, you are the managing director of Confused.com. I like a man whose name matches up with his job. Usain Bolt is a great name for a sprinter. Rudolph Valentino just screams sex symbol, while Kevin Chidwick is perfect for a bloke who works in insurance. Your career path was paved out the moment the ink dried on your birth certificate, and now you're Kevin Chidwick, Managing Director of Confused.com. I'm not taking the mick, Kev. I mean, name-wise, how could I throw stones when I dwell within the glass house that is Tom Wrigglesworth? I'm writing to you because I've got some questions about insurance, and I'm sorry, Kevin, but none of these questions is, can I save money with Confused.com? You see, Chidders, you insurance lot, you've managed a feat that's unique in business. A product that offers both guaranteed peace of mind and guaranteed blood-boiling stress. I believe the concept of insurance is a truly noble one. The idea that a group of people each buy an item that costs £100, then chuck in an extra quid for the one cack-handed chump who drops theirs down the toilet, well, that's great. It's moral. It's sensible. It separates us from the animals. That and the fact that we don't lick our own genitals. Some of us have tried, and indeed succeeded. But I haven't written to you just to boast. My concern is the once noble, almost socialist ideal of insurance has been hijacked by a band of nodding dogs, tubby opera singers, and meerkats who are inexplicably from Russia. Faced with this motley crew, it's no wonder Michael Winner has to tell us all to calm down, dear. The truth is, I was calm until Michael Winner appeared. Last year, I had high blood pressure. My GP told me in no uncertain terms to cut down my salt, limit my coffee, and most important of all, avoid the sight of Michael Winner. The thing is, Kevin, insurance has got really confusing. You, of all people, know that. You've built your company on it. But if something's confusing, the cure is knowledge and transparency. Whereas you've come along and said, look at all this confusion. He's confused. She's confused. We're all confused. Look, join the confusion. And as your head spins in bewilderment, we'll take a cut. Insurance didn't used to be this complicated. About 4,000 years ago in Babylon, which in those days was a city rather than just a tacky nightclub, Mediterranean sailing merchants would get loans to fund their shipments. They'd pay the lender a bit extra on top in exchange for the lender's guarantee that if the shipment was stolen or wrecked in the harsh high seas, the loan would be cancelled. And that's insurance. That's pure insurance, respected by its clients. History keeps no records of these Babylonian policies being missold by men in shiny robes who knocked on people's doors, interrupting an episode of Hanging Gardener's Question Time. Nor did you ever hear of any boat suddenly dropping anchor, allowing another boat, who was in on the scam, to ram them from behind, leaving the sailors with a dented stern, no cargo, and a whiplash claim. Skip on a few thousand years to 1688, and we have the Lloyd's Coffee House. This was a place where 17th century ship owners and sea merchants would meet, discuss business, and insure each other's risk. 17th century coffee shops were simpler places than those we have now. Back then, thirsty patrons had only a choice of cappuccino, espresso, or a very rudimentary Americano. Mockers were a pipe dream, and anyone overheard using the phrase skinny latte was taken out back and burnt as a witch. And had their loyalty card confiscated. So, the original Lloyd's insurers were all ship owners. And gradually, over the years, they became sick of life on the high seas, tired of adventure and exploration. They dreamt of something more. They dreamt of telephonic headsets, an unsympathetic boss, and timed toilet breaks. And from this dream was born the professional insurance broker. Lloyd's carried on for several hundreds of years, although the original coffee shop burnt down in 1838. No one's quite sure if this was the first example of an inside insurance job, or whether it was started by a caffeine-fueled maverick experimenting with a prototype panini press. Now, you may think, what could possibly go wrong? It started in a coffee shop. It's lovely. But remember, a lot of bad things started in coffee shops. Like that episode of Friends where they all went to England. Hideous. You see, in order to work, Lloyd's depended on what it called names. People with vast personal wealth used to underwrite any losses. Initially, these rich investors were all from the shipping industry. Newcomers had to be invited and panel approved before getting in on this license to print money. Over time, and to facilitate growth, Lloyd's began to lower the bar of acceptance. First, allowing investors from non-related markets, then non-British citizens. Finally, in a move that shook Lloyd's to the core, they allowed women. This was 1968. Long after they got the vote, but well before 1998, when the first woman entered the members' pavilion at Lord's. They'd actually been allowed in for years, but were kept out by the very real threat of bumping into Jeff Boycott. For a long time, the Lloyd's system worked very well. But a problem was growing in the shape of asbestosis. Then came Piper Alpha, the Exxon Valdez, the 1987 hurricane, and suddenly certain names were liable for billions of pounds. As the Lloyd's market began to enter a phase known in insurance as Excrement Creek, we began to hear about something called London market excess. It turns out that to cover their losses, some Lloyd's underwriters had started to reinsure their liabilities with each other. So when one guy made a loss, he'd make a claim from the guy next door, who'd then make a claim from the guy next door, and so on, basically, until the music stopped and everyone ended up in trouble. The result was a spiral of loss that ripped its way through the entire market. What the whole Lloyd's story reflects is the fact that insurance should be simple and transparent, but somehow gets more complicated, more dull, until no one can understand it. The whole thing ends up in a mixture of boredom and disaster. It's basically like an episode of Lost. We all have stories about our lives being made more awkward by needlessly complicated insurance. For example, I went on a skiing holiday to the Alps with a couple of mates. Now, as a bloke from Sheffield, this is a bit like me buying a cravat with the words class traitor embroidered on it. I say skiing holiday, it was more like a week of falling on your arse with a nice view. Anyway, as we were collecting our hire car from the airport, they just kept adding money to the bill. The first one was that we're going to have to pay more for additional drivers. More drivers, more risk. Seemed odd. We weren't intending to all drive at the same time. I tried to explain to the lady that we weren't the South Yorkshire three-man, one-car display team, but to no avail. Plus, you'd be mad to drive without these, the woman said, as she clattered a set of snow chains onto the desk and another €50 onto our bill. Fair enough. I mean, we needed snow chains, but it was more money. And then, with a casual air that was completely at odds with her devastating words, she said, "Oh, and by the way, your insurance excess is €2,000. Almost an afterthought. Cheerio, have a nice day, enjoy your snow chains, but remember, you're not insured until you do €2,000 worth of damage." And you can't relax knowing that. It's not a holiday when you're constantly thinking, if anything happens to the car, we're totally liable for the first €2,000. One little prang and the holiday's ruined. Although once you've had the first prang, all bets are off. You might as well do some real damage. Cut loose, enjoy yourself. What I'm saying is, twang a wing mirror, you might as well plough through a school. At least get your money's worth. What? We said, €2,000? That's ridiculous. She said, well, for €100, you can waive the excess altogether. I said, OK, hold on. On top of everything else you've sold us, if we pay another €100, whatever happens to the vehicle will be completely insured? She said, yes. I said, fine. In that case, here's €100. We'll waive the excess, and we won't be needing the snow chains. And that's what we did. We bashed and crashed our way through the whole holiday. The car was wrecked when we took it back, but we didn't care a jot. We'd waived the excess. When we were in bars at night, every so often one of us would shout, "Waive the excess!" and we'd order a Mexican wave, then down some shots. One day we got so cocky, we actually drove down the mountain. Like the best toboggan you've ever seen. We handled the green and blue slopes with aplomb, clipping a few snowboarders on the way, but that's just public service. We were doing really well until we hit the moguls. Then, As we were being airlifted off, the helicopter pilot said, "Why did you have snow chains, lads?" I said, from my stretcher, "Well, because we've waived the excess. It didn't seem necessary to have both." And that's the problem, you see. That's the problem with insurance. It's become so complex and expensive that we, as consumers, are incapable of working out what's best for us. Which also explains why there are so many bogus claims. We think that once we've paid for insurance, we might as well get the benefit, whether we need to claim or not. And insurance companies benefit either way. If there are very few claims, they don't hand the profits down and reduce premiums. Oh no, they just make a fortune. If the number of claims goes up, the insurance companies protect their profit by jacking up the premiums. It's a license to print money, chidders. And if I can't understand insurance, as a reasonably bright young man with his own programme on Radio 4, admittedly only as a result of BBC diversity regulations requiring there to be at least one northerner in the 6:30 slot, then how is my 94-year-old grandmother going to get her head around it? My grandmother's name is Mabel Bradley. She lives in Nether Edge, Sheffield. I got her to write to a number of insurance companies with a thoroughly misguided query to see if they were honourable enough to help her out of her state of confusion or whether they'd just see it as an opportunity to make more money.
Dear Sir, my husband Arthur and I have been happy customers of yours from the moment we took out our life insurance policy in 1972. It was the day after decimalisation and we were still reeling from the shock. Ever since that day, we have always aimed to be model customers, and Arthur has constantly maintained that we are obliged to inform you of any changes in lifestyle. Now, Arthur and I have never been ones for lifestyle changes. Critics have occasionally described our lifestyles as entirely static. That is, until recently, when our good friend Brian showed us his new bread maker. We were both immediately impressed, but when Brian informed us that the device came complete with an inbuilt nut and seed dispenser, Arthur became almost visibly green with envy. In a move I now regret, Arthur was dispatched to Cole Brothers to acquire a bread maker of our own. Unfortunately, my husband has always suffered from a sort of kitchen appliance snow blindness. And so, following our first unsuccessful attempt to make a multi-seed bloomer, we discovered Arthur had in fact purchased a deep-fat fryer. Arthur, with his usual philosophical bent, suggested a keep calm and carry on approach, making the best of a bad job. But whilst feasting on such delights as bubble and squeak tempura followed by battered viennetta has lit up our lives, we are beginning to realise that with 2 out of every 3 meals being deep-fried, this may not be the healthiest of eating options. Arthur and myself are now well into our 90s, and we have no wish to be remembered for taking advantage of a multinational insurance company like yourself. Surely it is only right, therefore, that we be instantly classified as high risk and our status raised from amber to red. To that end, we assume our premiums are due for a rise, so please advise us the best way to go about this. Yours sincerely, Mabel Bradley.
Oh, indeed. Oh, indeed. And I know what you're all wondering. Did the insurance companies put grandmother's increasingly deep-fried mind at rest? Well, the first insurance company, they wrote back and said, provided the details Mabel gave during the application process were correct and you keep paying your premiums, this will not affect your policy in any way. But it was a different story with the second insurance company. No reassurance about the deep fat diet. Instead, they said they wanted to investigate the matter further. We now live in fear that one day they're going to turn up on Granny's doorstep and start dusting her sunflower oil bottle for prints. But that's the point about insurance. In its purest form, every detail gets taken into account. For example, the fact that I can go skiing and insure myself against a £100,000 helicopter ride should I break my leg with a policy that costs me £50 suggests that someone has calculated that I have a 0.0005% chance of breaking my leg. Now, admittedly, it also suggests they've never seen the way I ski. But either way, it's impressive. With insurance, every action or choice we take is quantified, given a value, and subjected to the unflinching rules of statistics, which is why anything can be insured. Cars, wives, pets, lives, anything. If it has a value placed on it, and an element of chance associated with it, it can have money laid down against it, and be pitted against similar items in what purports to be a business, but in reality is a game of risk, chance, and expectation. This is where the sophisticated trade of insurance starts to mimic the seedy world of betting shops. On one hand, we have an intimidating group of trenchcoat-wearing, cigar-smoking gangsters manipulating the outcome of events purely motivated by money, and on the other, betting shops. We make weird decisions about insurance because we don't know the facts. Did you know that insurance can actually make you more careless? It's to do with something called a moral hazard, which in the highway code is identified by a red triangle with a picture of Paris Hilton in it. In insurance, moral hazards are a concept where the act of insuring something makes that outcome more likely. So if you have fire insurance, you're more likely to smoke in bed. Even non-smokers have woken up in the middle of the night thinking, what am I doing with this lit Havana? That's the power of the moral hazard. That's why I won't take out pet insurance. I love my cats. But I'm worried that the power of the moral hazard means as soon as I take out insurance, I won't give a toss if they live or die. I'll start not feeding them or flinging them into overhead power lines. Apparently that's human nature. And because we're confused about insurance, we get sold stuff we don't really need. One insurance company sold a policy to 3 devout Christians in Inverness. The premiums were £100 a year, which would pay them £1 million should any of them fall pregnant by immaculate conception and give birth to the next Christ. The money was supposed to cover the cost of bringing up the Messiah. And it amazes me how proud insurance companies are about the weird policies they underwrite. Lloyd's insure Michael Flatley's legs for £25 million. Imagine the joy he could bring to the world if he accidentally broke both of them. Imagine the joy he'd bring to me if he let me help. And it's been rumoured that J-Lo's derriere is down for £250 million. Put Flatley and J-Lo in a to-the-death ass-kicking competition, and we could probably fix Greece. Why do the companies brag about these mad policies? Is it supposed to be a marketing tool? Are we supposed to think, wow, they're pretty good at getting money out of people for the most ludicrous reasons? They're the ones for me. My friend Jane had a run-in with an insurance company that she's still paying for, both financially and emotionally. Last year, she was living on her own with a pretty beat-up car which she knew little and cared less about. Mind you, Jane's not very into cars. If you asked her what model it was, she'd probably say, a red one. Which proves how little she knows, because it was blue. Jane's insurance company had a thing called auto-renew. You've probably heard of it. It's where the insurance company automatically renew your insurance just as it's running out. There aren't many industries that can just help themselves to another year of business without anyone really wanting it. It's just them and the people who produce Midsummer Murders. But it all seemed fine. The only problem was, over the course of the year, Jane had lost and replaced her credit card. So when the insurance company tried to auto-renew, the card was declined. The transaction never completed. They wrote to her and said, you need to settle the amount immediately, or you'll be driving with invalid insurance. The problem was, when the letter arrived, Jane was on holiday with a guy from work. By the time she got back from her trip, her insurance had been cancelled. But her relationship with the guy from work had blossomed into a romance. If this was a rom-com, there would be a montage of them walking together, eating together, staring into each other's eyes, all to a song by Ronan Keating. Although in real life, they mainly just stayed in doing each other. If you saw a montage of that, it would be a very different film. A few days later, Jane got round to opening the pile of post. Have you ever read a letter from a needy insurance company? It breaks your heart. They start by asking, where are you? Please, get in touch. You owe us money. The final letter is just an envelope with a picture of a starving insurance salesman saying, just £5 a month keeps Dean in hair gel. And a one-off gift of £100 could buy him a brand new shiny suit. Jane called them and said, "I'm so sorry. I've been on holiday. Can I still have the insurance?" They said her quote had expired and they'd have to start from scratch. A new quote was raised and the deal was done. All seemed fine until about 3 weeks later when they wrote to her again, this time saying, "Your insurance is about to be cancelled unless you send us proof of your 5 years no claims bonus." Of course, this no claims data was held by the people who provided her previous policy. The same company that was now asking her for proof. She called them up. She spoke to a chap called Liam in sales. You know the sort. Pimples, shiny suit, slick down brain. Jane said, "Look, I've been sent this letter." "Yeah, that's right. We need to see the proof of your no claims bonus. You could be telling us anything." Fancy that. An insurance company worrying about the existence of misleading information. So Jane gets put through to Steve in the claims department. Different character to Liam, a bit more educated, you know. I don't know his exact qualifications. I'm guessing a BTEC in SMARM and a merit in talking bollocks. "Hello," says Jane. "Can you send me proof of my no claims bonus?" "Certainly," says Steve. "But may I ask you, why are you thinking of leaving us?" "What?" said Jane. "Well," said Steve, "you only need proof of your no claims bonus if you're going to leave. So before you do that, I'd just like to pop you through to sales and see if they can match your new quote." And before Jane could say, "Oh, no. There was a click followed by, "Hello, you're through to sales. Liam speaking." "What we need, madam," he kept saying, "is for you to fax over your proof of your no claims bonus." "But you've got the proof of my no claims bonus," said Jane. "Go fax yourself." Eventually it all got sorted and she started paying her insurance by direct debit. Meanwhile, the relationship with the guy from work was getting serious. He lived virtually next door to the office, so it was much easier to stay at his. She hardly touched the car anymore. In fact, they talked about her moving in, which would have made a lot of sense. She could walk to work, and instead of traffic jams, the most she'd have to worry about would be congestion in the lift. 3 months into her new relationship, and 3 months into the car insurance contract, the red or blue car got nicked. This convinced Jane that it was time to move into her boyfriend's flat. When Jane phoned the insurers to tell them her car had been stolen, Steve, in claims, said, "OK, well, looking at your policy, you are set to receive one lump sum equal to the market value of the car, which is £300. Jane said, "Well, I've decided I don't need a new car. Could I forget about the claim and just cancel the policy?" No, it's a year-long contract. You can't just forget it and walk away." "Well, I might as well make a claim then." "All right," said Steve. "I'll have the cheque sent by post." "OK," said Jane, "but you'll need my new address. I'm moving into my boyfriend's." Now, 3 months later, life was good. Jane was still paying off the car insurance contract, but otherwise it was domestic bliss. She'd even got her own cushions on the sofa and was making plans for purchasing a throw. Then, completely out of the blue, or was it red, the insurance company wrote to her and said, "Please be aware, your premiums have gone up." Jane rang them and said, "How can my premiums have gone up? I haven't got a car." They said, "But madam, our records show you've recently moved into a slightly rougher area. Whether you actually have a car or not is irrelevant." You see, Kevin, that's how things work in the confusing world of insurance. You can find yourself paying more for a car that doesn't exist than for one that does. Well, it's time to make a change. What I'm proposing is a new way of doing things. We'll call it the Wrigglesworth system. Bit big-headed, I know, Chidders, but we need to think branding. The Wrigglesworth system will bring into being a totally nationalised insurance service. It'll see insurance going back to its roots. That's why I'm writing to you from the spiritual successor to the Lloyd's Coffee House, Starbucks. Here's my idea, Chidders. We all pay in, nationally, to a big pot. At the end of every year, it gets added up, and we get back what we were honestly out of pocket by. Instead of all the insurance companies, reinsurance companies, and comparison websites clouding the issues and creaming the profits, we hand the whole thing over to a bloke who can publicly and transparently calculate all the risks that we face in our daily lives. I'm thinking of John McCririck. And we, the sensible people, will be liable for each other. And to take the load off John, I've already come up with a simple list of things which will be automatically insured under the Wrigglesworth system. Drinking-related injuries. Fully covered and you're allowed 2 per year. Any more than that and you're off the scheme and on Fanta for life. Now hold on, you're thinking this system is open to abuse. Not everyone is as sensible as everyone else. But I've thought of that. If I see someone acting irresponsibly, playing hopscotch on a level crossing or making toast in the bath, I can issue them with a don't be a dick warning that lasts for 30 minutes. If they make a claim for anything in that time, they get no money and a 2-year ban. Car accidents. We're all allowed 1 major and 2 minors in any 10-year period. Any more than that means you're an idiot. Oh, and Jeremy Clarkson will be burnt at the stake. Nothing to do with insurance, just to show we mean business. Home contents. Big electrical goods like TVs, fridges, computers. You can claim for 1 of these every 5 years. Any more than that, you're doing something wrong. Read the manual. Stop putting Ryvita in the DVD drive. Then, at the end of every year, all the claims are added up in an evening-long telethon. Oh, Tom, I can hear you say, and in this Orwellian nightmare state you're imagining, will it be compulsory to watch this? And I'll say no. It won't be compulsory. It'll be unmissable because, remember, the whole event will be hosted by John McCririck. So, Kevin Chidwick of Confused.com, I'm offering you the chance to bring the whole insurance industry out of the darkness and into the light. You know how confused we are. Imagine how powerful we could be together, harnessing the combined strength of our silly names for one almighty explosion of Riggy Chidleswick worthiness. So join me in campaigning for the introduction of the Wrigglesworth system, and we'll see a new society. A society where everyone has the protection they deserve. A society where insurance shows its workings and reveals its secrets, so that we no longer get confused by a fat opera singer pretending to be Russian while he nods his head from the window of a little red car. Or blue. And a society where John McCririck is given his rightful place as Lord of Uncertainty, King of Risk and Duke of Chance. Only then will we all be free to feel peace of mind, be free of blood-boiling stress, and we will feel truly insured. Yours faithfully, Tom Wrigglesworth. Dear Andrew Haines, you don't know me, but I know you. You're the head of the Civil Aviation Authority. I admire that, Andrew. I admire any aviation authority that has some manners. I'm writing to you in my capacity as the man in the street. Or perhaps should I say the man in the seat. 36F to be precise, attempting to open a bag of wine gums that cost me the best part of €4. You heard me, Andrew, €4. You could buy actual wine for that. And what's more perverse is that the plane ticket only cost me €5. And that's the problem. Your mates in the low-cost airline business seem to think that flogging bargain flights with one hand while rifling through customers' pockets with the other is a perfectly acceptable business model. I want you to show some authority, Andrew, because that is not civil. It's borderline cheeky. Now, Andrew, let's set aside for one moment the whole question of whether a low-cost airline is a good thing. Although in my mind, the words low, cost and airline really shouldn't be in the same sentence. Well, there are some things I'm happy to have at a cost. Would you fancy the idea of a bargain heart bypass? Or sending your wife off for a rock-bottom cesarean? Congratulations, Mrs. Haines. Another baby delivered on time and on schedule. And at £8.06, she's over our weight allowance, so that will cost you extra. Andrew, you can tell I myself am a consumer of the low-cost airline. I was born and brought up in Yorkshire. And although I live in London and have, when circumstances have made it absolutely unavoidable, consumed bruschetta, there's still a part of me that rises up shouting, "You've paid £6 for this! It's just bread!" Some people have an inner peace or inner strength. I have an inner Jeff boycott. Therefore, as a proud Yorkshireman, I'm in favour of anything being low cost. I hope no Yorkshiremen ring in to complain about that stereotype, but let's face it, it's unlikely unless the BBC start to reverse the charges. So yes, I am a fan of low-cost airlines. At least I would be if they were what they say they are. Because quite frankly, Andrew, the low-cost airlines are low cost in the same way that Greg Wallace is a world authority on cooking. That is to say, they're not. Greg Wallace is simply a man who knows how to use a spoon repeatedly. As I sit here, Andrew, I can see the duty-free trolley bump its way up the aisle. And it's this stainless steel harlot of the skies with its gaudy wares designed to beguile the unwary traveller that is almost a physical representation of the low-cost airline marketing illusion. The true price is concealed from us amid a labyrinth of additional charges, gently tweaked percentage rates, and small print that couldn't be read by an owl. With 20/20 vision and an electron microscope. In fact, as the trolley lurches past, it's easy to see the only thing these sky pirates don't hide from us is their naked greed for profit, their naked hatred of frills, and their naked yet baffling desire to sell us a scratch card. Who wants a scratch card on an aeroplane? The odds against being killed in a plane crash may be stratospheric, but the last thing I want at 30,000 feet is to be told to get excited about a 1,000,000 to 1 chance. Now, you may say, Andrew, if we get caught by these extra costs, it's our own fault. But these low-cost operators exploit a fundamental fact and flaw of human nature. Everyone loves a bargain. It's all fully reclinable armchair psychology. And in some guise or other, we've been falling for it for years. Take the 99p suffix. We're all fooled into thinking £9.99 isn't actually £10. And it scales up. You look at a flat-screen TV, £699.99, and you think, oh, £600, bargain. I'll take it. I might get one for my mum as well. If it said 700, you'd think, no chance. I'm not made of money. I want something to watch TV on, not an MRI machine. That's why I do all my shopping at pound stores. At least they have the common decency to round it up. When you go to a pound store, you know what you're getting. Invariably, it's crap that's never fit for purpose. But it's rounded off crap that's never fit for purpose. People come round and say, Tom, why have you got 6 mops with no handles and 105 A5 envelopes that don't stick down properly? And I say, because they're honest. The thing is, whether it's a 99p suffix or a promotional price from a low-cost airline, it's devious to make people think they're getting a better deal than they are. And that's my problem, Andrew. It's not the airlines making a profit. It's the way they go about it. We want plain speaking. We want plain dealing. We want plain plane tickets. Wouldn't it be liberating if just for one day the low-cost airline operators conducted their business with the same transparent honesty as a man stomping across a campsite clutching a loo roll? Sadly, the reality is very different. Let's start with perhaps the most famous low-cost airline of them all, Ryanair. Now, I'll be the first to admit that they've got a first-class safety record and a first-class fleet. It must just be an unfortunate coincidence that their blue and yellow colour scheme makes their planes look like massive cans of WD-40. But this is a company that got censured by the Advertising Standards Authority 9 times in 2 years. One time was for an ad that featured a cocktail-swigging, bikini-clad beauty next to a strapline, book to the sun. The only tiny, niggling flaw was the fact that one of these destinations on offer was Oslo, in Norway, which, during February and March, the time period of the offer, has a temperature of between 0 and 4 degrees. If I want to stand in a freezing town struggling to understand the locals, I'd go to Scarborough. In August. And the other airlines are all at the same game. In 2009, the average EasyJet passenger spent 1/5 of their total spend with the airline on extra costs. 1/5? Who wants that? If I was that desperate to experience paying 20% more for a service than I thought I would be in the first place, I'd stay at home and hire a plumber. BMI Baby charge people £20 a time for what those in the business call no-show letters. What's a no-show letter? Well, if you have to cancel a flight and need to claim for it on your insurance, you need a letter from the airline saying you didn't fly. Sounds simple enough, but in order to supply you with this glorious document, BMI Baby charged £20. £20 for a letter. I mean, I haven't seen this document, but I imagine every single one is handwritten by medieval monks and printed on gold leaf. And when it arrives, the travel insurance guys all stop work and say, well, this is a thing of beauty. I wonder how much this costs. £20, a veritable bargain. And that's the genius of the low-cost airlines. They'll get their extra costs even if you don't fly. I visited one of their websites. The first thing you come to is a tick box saying you agree to their terms and conditions. This gatekeeper of litigation basically says, hello, customer, come on in, welcome. Now, we should point out, whatever happens, we're right and you're wrong. But apart from that, relax, make yourself comfortable. Shrug off your worries, pack them in an old kit bag. And I hope for your sake that bag doesn't weigh more than 10 kilograms. We charge extra for that. How can they get away with charging extra for a bag? We're talking plane travel. We're hurtling through the air, 500 miles an hour, 8 miles above the ground. This should be accompanied by a bit of fuss, a sense of occasion. It should almost certainly be accompanied by a bag. And they even charge extra for check-in. Check-in, Andrew. In the arena of civil aviation, checking in is an absolute certainty. It's not optional. You can't charge extra for that. Woe betide the fool who thought the complicated high-tech process of ticking someone's name off the list, asking them if they've packed anything sharp, and pressing print on a computer would be included in the price. No. Instead they say, we're an economy airline. Get your own ink. Use your own printer. Stand in front of your own mirror and ask yourself, have you packed anything sharp? And if you don't like your answer, take yourself off your own side room and spread yourself. Last time I did my own check-in, I ended up frisking myself in the bathroom because I didn't like my attitude and I couldn't believe I wasn't carrying drugs. But this is one of the great business miracles of the budget airline. They've subcontracted out part of their job to us, the customer, and charge us for the privilege. This means that anyone who's checked in online has unwittingly become a temporary member of staff, being paid approximately minus £6 an hour. Minus £6 an hour. Minimum wage in the UK is £6 8p per hour. Now, I've worked for some dodgy employers in my time, but I've never been paid £12 below the minimum wage. Even when the amount of money the company lost as a result of employing me was much more. So I began wondering, how many flights do you need to check in online for before you can actually say you work for the airline and can claim employee rights? It's a fair question. Economic times are hard. I just want to know if the airlines are going to treat me like any other employee. Is it reasonable to expect an appraisal? Can I expect the CEO to turn up on my door saying, Tom, good to catch up, glad you're gelling well with the team. Few areas of improvement. Yeah, I like the way you enter a date of birth, but you could do some work on your right-clicking. So I phoned up one of the airlines to find out what my position was. Now, I knew this wouldn't be easy. I didn't expect to be put through to a menu saying, press 1 if you want to book a flight. Press 2 if you want to inquire about an existing booking. Press 3 if you're a sarcastic, long-haired Radio 4 comedian trying to make a point to these friends of the world. But the girl I got put through to, let me put it this way. If she'd have been one of the Wright brothers, the science of aviation would have not got beyond sticking on some feathers and jumping off something high. I'm beginning to suspect that the only reason Icarus glued those wings to himself was to avoid a low-cost airline. Anyway, I explained to the girl on the other end of the phone that I'd been working for them, on and off, for 5 years, and that while my work for the airline was strictly part-time, it still did represent the longest term of employment I've ever had. I don't want to go into too many details of my working history. There are some employment gaps that I struggle to explain even to myself. But suffice to say that a cumulative total of 20 hours work is, by my standards, gold watch time. I said to her, if I were to apply for a job in the near future, would the airline write me a reference? Nothing too fancy, just Tom has worked for us for a number of years and we've always found his self-checking in exemplary, hence his substantial net negative salary. He is being groomed as potential management material, at which point he can expect to start paying us upwards of £20 an hour. To cut a long story short, I didn't get a reference from the airline. Seems all the work I've done for them over the years counts for nothing. Although I did get an invite to their Christmas do. But how do the airlines expect us to take them seriously when they throw these sorts of extra charges at us? We expect to get what we buy. It's like selling a theatre ticket, then demanding the crowd have a whip round to pay for the curtain to be lifted. Although I went to see Rock of Ages recently, and midway through, we collected 200 quid for the curtain to be dropped. And a lot of that was from members of the cast. These extra charges can result in some extraordinary situations. You can find that it's cheaper to fly halfway round the world than it is to pay a low-cost airline to carry your bags from London to Portugal. Sounds ridiculous, but that's what happened to a woman called Victoria. She flew from Bali to London using Air Asia, and it cost her 230 quid. Proper bargain. My inner Jeff Boycott would have been celebrating like he'd just won the Ashes. However, when she got to London, she then decided to fly to Portugal. She's a travel journalist, by the way. She's not just pathologically indecisive. Mind you, I've often flown into London Stansted and thought, do you know what? I wish I was in Portugal. But then again, I've often flown into London Stansted and thought, do you know what? I wish I was in London. So, Victoria booked a flight with the low-cost airline from Stansted to Porto. The flight itself cost £90. Not bad. Unfortunately, Victoria was carrying 23 kilograms of luggage. There hadn't been a problem with Air Asia. On the flight from Bali, she paid $11 for 20 kilos of baggage, and no one had minded too much about the extra 3 kilograms. I guess Bali's the kind of relaxed, chilled-out place where these things get overlooked. I imagine the Balinese check-in girl, her head wreathed in flowers, saying something like, only 3 kilograms over? Clearly, you're not taking home enough examples of the stone carvings for which this island is famous. Different story with the low-cost airline. Firstly, their baggage allowance is 15 kilograms, not 20. So, when she got to check in her suitcase, she was told it was 8 kilos over. No problem, said Victoria. I'll pay the excess. At which point, she was told it was £20 per kilo, making a total of £160. Remember, she was trying to put her bag into the hold, not into orbit. Victoria's solution was to pay for a second bag. A second bag that she had to buy in the airport. The cheapest one she could find was £35. The airline told her that was fine. She could check in a second bag for 80 quid. It would have been 30 if she'd done it in advance, but 2 hours before flying, it goes up to 80. What happens in those last 2 hours? Do they get some special elite baggage handler on? The baggage handling equivalent of Naomi Campbell? Sorry, love, Dave won't get into his forklift for anything less than £80 a bag. Finally, Victoria made it onto the plane, at which point the boarding staff asked to weigh her hand luggage and told her it was 1 kilogram over the allowance for the cabin, costing her an extra £35. Victoria did what any sane person would do at this point. Burst into tears. To which a kindly staff member from the low-cost airline said the following helpful words. There's no use crying. Stop crying and pay the fee or the plane will go without you. Ultimately, Victoria had to spend a total of £145 on baggage in addition to her £90 flight, making it £5 more expensive to fly from London to Portugal with a supposedly low-cost airline than from Bali to London with one of these supposedly high-cost ones. And that's without factoring in the cost of 3-month treatment from a fully reclinable armchair psychologist. Now, Andrew, I know what your argument's going to be. You're going to say the low-cost airlines have opened up air travel to the masses. But have they? In my eyes, the low-cost airlines appear so good at discouraging people from using air travel, I'm beginning to think they're actually sleeper agents for the Green Party. I know you don't want to slag off your mates, Andrew. Your going to tell me that they're good guys, charitable guys, the sort of guys who wouldn't sell their grandmother to make a quick buck. Of course not. What they'd actually do is give their grandmother away for virtually nothing. Then hit the buyer with an additional walking stick fee, a tartan blanket supplement, and a support stocking surcharge. I have a grandmother. She's 94, and she lives in Nether Edge, Sheffield. I wouldn't sell her to make a fast buck, but I'd think nothing of getting her to write a letter to all the low-cost airlines just to see how far their pursuit of money would go.
To whom it may concern, I'm writing to you with something of a confession. My husband Arthur was recently invited to partake in our nephew Michael's stag do. Normally, Arthur would politely decline such a request on account of his delicate constitution. But this particular event was to take place in Amsterdam, and Arthur, who has been a devotee of canals for more years than either of us can possibly remember, simply couldn't resist. He returned, however, a changed man, assuring me that a combination of the language barrier and a mix-up in hand gestures were entirely to blame for his ending up on row A of a strip show. Following this traumatic brush with sensuality, the best man attempted to soothe Arthur by ordering him a tall glass of frothy coffee, served, according to local custom, with a tapered white cigar. This proved to be a proper tonic, and Arthur's trademark entrepreneurial brain started to grind into action, inspired by, in his words, smelling the sound of 1,000 bright colours. As a result, when the stag party checked in at Schiphol Airport the next morning, Arthur was lugging 40 pairs of genuine Dutch clogs. He had become convinced that the clog would kick-start the British economy, first taking Sheffield by storm, then spreading through South Yorkshire like wooden wildfire. However, the check-in staff explained that the clogs were to be classified as excess baggage and incur an unexpected charge of £145. In a bid to avoid paying this fare, Arthur and the rest of the 20-strong party each donned a pair of clogs and trudged through the tiled departure hall. Upon hearing the full story, I was appalled that Arthur would have attempted to pull the wool over your eyes. So, can you rebill us for the cost of transporting our excess baggage? Until then, the pile of unsold clogs will only remind us of Arthur's criminal cunning, rather than representing an exciting new trade relationship between Britain and Holland. Yours sincerely, Mabel Bradley.
Now, we sent my grandmother's letter off to a variety of low-cost airlines, and I'm delighted to announce that their pursuit of profit doesn't go that far, because not one of them asked for Arthur to cough up the necessary excess baggage fee. What lesson can we draw from this? Well, it's that if you're carrying too much luggage on your way back from holiday, then make sure, when you convert your euros back into pounds, you also convert your extra luggage into clogs. Of course, like measles, mumps, and the musicals of Andrew Lloyd Webber, money grabbing is an ever-present evil in our society. And it's already spread from the airlines to the airport. I went to Stansted recently, partly to catch a plane, and partly because I like watching people drink Starbucks in a rush. And of course, I had to go through security. A process so ridiculously strict that surely it won't be long until we all have to board planes wearing transparent baby grows. Now, we all know airports have a very strict policy when it comes to liquids and gels. 100 millilitres maximum. 101 mil? No! Sorry, Mr. Wrigglesworth, that's a clear and present danger. You may as well be boarding with a hand grenade. 99 mil, on the other hand, no one bats an eyelid. This 99 thing doesn't just work with pounds and pence, you see. Anyway, these liquids must be carried through security in a see-through plastic bag and measuring no more than 20 centimetres by 20 centimetres. Now, I'm not a flippant man, Andrew. I take airport security as seriously as the next man, especially if the next man is tripping over his shoes and sweating over his holy book of choice. You'd have thought, given all the money sloshing around airports, from the shops, the cafe and what have you, not to mention the price of your airline ticket in the first place, they could probably manage to dole out a free plastic bag. Even my pound shop can manage that. But not the airports. Oh no. They wanted me to put a shiny £1 coin into a vending machine, yielding 4 brand new transparent bags of exactly the right specification, housed in a plastic egg to protect the precious delivery and leaving you in no doubt that you've just received the world's worst Kinder Surprise. Of course, it's not just the airports. In fact, little extra costs are spreading across every aspect of our daily lives until they are as omnipresent as taxation or the actor John Barrowman. And it's all down to those 2 words, booking fee. Rarely can 2 words cover such an incredible world of pain. Unless those 2 words are parks and centre. Because booking fees seem to apply to everything. Hotels. You want to stay in a hotel, you pay a booking fee. Concerts. You want to see a gig, you pay a booking fee. My problem is that it's not a booking fee, is it? It's a doing a thing fee. You want to do a thing, you do a thing. But don't forget the doing a thing fee. And it's ridiculous. If you're buying a ticket to anything, then the price of it should include the cost of buying the ticket. I don't think I'm advocating some revolutionary system of communist thought by saying that the price of something should be the price of something. And it hasn't always been there. We never used to have booking fees whenever anyone did anything. I don't remember in the Bible. Judas going to the Pharisees and saying, "All right, lads, I've betrayed the Messiah. Just going to top up the reckoning. That'll be 30 pieces of silver for a fully comprehensive betrayal. And 1 piece of silver booking fee." What's that? PayPal? No way, mate. My great fear is, where are all these extra costs going to end? I'm less worried about my children growing up in a world without water, a world without oil, a world with Justin Bieber, than I am worried about them growing up in a world where numbers themselves have no meaning. What will the maths books of the future be like? If Jane buys 6 apples for 12 pence each and pays with a £1 coin, how much will she have left? Well, teacher, once you've taken into account the apple purchasing fee, the apple handling fee, and of course the apple booking fee, then I think you'll find that Jane's pound is sadly insufficient. Jane doesn't deserve apples, she deserves to be in a debtor's prison. And you've got to do something about all of this, Andrew. Your industry, the airline industry, let the extra charges genie out of the low-cost bottle. So it's up to you to squash it. Otherwise, we'll start some direct action. Yep, that's right. You'll find us manning the barricades, waving our banners and shouting things like, "We shall not be moved, except for the basic advertised price for which you said you would move us." So, how are we, the people, going to strike back at the not-so-low-cost airline operators? Well, I'll tell you, Andrew. I started thinking again about all that time I've spent checking in, doing the airline's job, and being charged for the privilege. And that's when I realised what we need to do. So, Andrew, and all of your terribly polite friends in the Civil Aviation Authority, we've got a message for you to send out to all the operators in the low-cost airline industry. What we want is this: flights that cost what you say they're going to cost. An end to charging us for stuff that by rights we ought to get as standard. And every so often, we, as customers, would like to be treated with a bit of respect. We don't want to take extreme measures, Andrew, but tell the airlines not to push us. Tell them to make some changes instead. Give us the real cost. Don't add them on extra at the last minute when we've gone past the point of no return. Let them stand out proud. And if we want to pay, we'll pay. Because the truth is, we don't travel because of low-cost airlines, we travel despite them. And if you don't do anything, Andrew, we're going to unleash the secret weapon. It's a sheet of paper with words and numbers on. It's called an invoice. And it's for all our time that the low-cost airlines have wasted. Imagine everyone who's ever flown with one of these airlines sending one of these invoices. Thousands upon thousands of invoices, and then, if they don't pay up, launching thousands upon thousands of actions in court. Then we'll see whose time is being wasted. I mean, it's probably still ours. But it's going to annoy them. And just to really play with their heads and to pull the wool over their eyes, just like they've been pulling over ours, we're going to round every single one of those invoices down to the nearest 99 pence. That way, they're going to think that they're getting a bargain. Yours civilly, Tom Wrigglesworth.